Are we live? Are we live? Hello, hello everyone. Hopefully you can see me. Hopefully you can hear me. We're going to start the webinar in about 2 or 3 minutes here. Welcome. I'm so glad you guys have decided to spend some time with us today. If you look over to the side here, there's something that says chat. I think that's what it looks like on your side too. That's our chat stream. And get in the chat stream really quickly and just let us know, hey, I can see, I can hear. We want to make sure our technical quality is good before we get started. So get over in the chat stream. Hey, let us know where you're from as well. If you have any questions, you want to go ahead and get the discussion started, feel free to do that. But the main thing I want to make sure is that we can see and we can hear clearly. And I have Haley is going to be joining me today. She's going to be reading questions, and we're going to be talking through Q&A. So Haley, everything good technically on your end?
Yeah, we're good to go, Ben.
All righty, that's great. So someone just said they're from Middleport, Ohio. That's David. You're from Middleport, Ohio. I lived in Ohio for a short period of time in a town called Enon, right outside of Dayton. E-N-O-N. So spelled backwards is none, because that's about how many people lived in that town. But I loved it. So a shout out to anyone who's there from Ohio. And we, DeKalb, Illinois. I was just in Springfield, not Springfield, Illinois, Carbondale, maybe that was what it's called a couple of days ago. Somebody from Odessa, Texas. Love Odessa. Love it. So, again, we appreciate you guys taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us for this webinar. So we're going to have a couple of kind of times throughout this training where we're going to have Q&A. And so as you type in questions, Haley's going to kind of filter through those, and we're not going to have time to get to all of them, and then we'll have some members of our team that are in the chat stream, trying to answer as many questions as they can, kind of in the stream, but we're not going to be able to get to all of them like talking out loud, but we're going to get to some of them. So as we talk through content and you think of a question, we say we would love for this to be a dialogue, not a monologue, okay? And you guys can share stuff that you've learned with each other. I'm going to share some stuff that I've learned, but there's no way I know everything or even half of all that there is to know about guest services. So I love the idea of us learning from each other. So again, I just appreciate you guys jumping in. Jim said that he's ready. Jim, that's great. Pam from South Carolina, that's awesome. So glad you've again taken time to join us today. So Haley, do you want to move towards the jumping into content now, or do you want to allow some more time for people to kind of log in and get comfortable and all of that?
Yeah, Ben, I think that we could go ahead and get started.
All right, great. Let's do it, guys. I'm excited. Today we're talking about guest services, so I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to move to PowerPoint. So we're going to go through these, and there'll be potentially a time later where Haley might be able to send you some of these slides, or there may be a replay if you miss some of the stuff that we talk about. If you just have, I missed a small part of this point, you put it in the chat stream. We'll try to recap as much as we can. But also I'm going to move pretty quickly because we have a lot to talk about, okay? So I'm going to click screen share, and then I'm going to move over to my presentation. Haley, everything good? Can you see that?
Yeah, we're good to go.
All right, so today we're talking about how to move guests from outsiders to insiders. Now, let me go ahead and say that everyone who visits your church is a guest. Everyone who attends your church is a guest. Even the faithful core, who have been coming for a couple years, they're still guests in the sense that they should still be treated like you would if you had guests come over to your house. But for this training, we're going to focus particularly on people who are there for the first time or have just been there for a few Sundays. So they're not real comfortable with the surroundings. They're not sure where everything is. They don't automatically know what to do in all situations. So we're talking about really first-timers, second-timers, third-timers, people who are just kind of getting in the mix at your church. That's who we're going to focus on today. This is really about how to engage guests without freaking them out. In my first job, part of what I did, my pastor said, I want you to just walk around before church. Anyone who's sitting in our auditorium but doesn't have anyone talking to them, or you don't know, it's a very small church, so you know they're a guest, I want you to introduce yourself and talk to them. And man, some of the people loved it, and they were like, man, it's so nice to have somebody to talk to. And some people, I could tell, they just wanted to be left alone. They didn't want to be bombarded by somebody who worked there. So there's this dance of people who are very introverted, and they just kind of want to go to church and they want to do their thing, and people who are very extroverted, and they love the idea of meeting new people. So we're trying to figure out the balance of engaging people without freaking them out. My name is Ben Crawshaw, by the way. I'm Director of Content here with the Rocket Company. A couple decades of ministry experience. I started in 1998 working at summer camp, and then started working at church after that. I love small churches. My dad's a pastor of a small church. My first 6 years, I worked at a church of about 125 people in Dawsonville, Georgia, and I love small churches. I really do. And I'm passionate about helping churches and seeing churches make a difference and seeing differences happen in churches, hopefully helping you take one step to move in the direction you want to go, or you feel like God's leading you, or you want your congregation to go. So my goal today is for guests to have a great experience at your church, and for guests to come back and plant themselves at your church. So it not just be, oh, that was great. I want them to come back, and I want that's really my goal for what we're talking about. And if you hang around to the end, we're going to be together for a little under 1 hour. If you stay to the end, I'm going to talk about 6 questions to ask yourself and your team to get ready for first-time guests. 6 questions that will help you plan this Sunday. It won't help you think through everything and plan everything, but if you just think through these 6 questions, these pretty simple questions, you're already going to be on your way to being, hopefully a lot more prepared than you've been in the past. Even if you've done a great job, this will still help you take another step in the right direction, I believe. Now, from what I've experienced and trainings that I've been to or church conferences, most guest services trainings talk more about philosophy than practicality. And they talk more about, the why, and like the meaning and trends and all this stuff that's happening. And I found myself in a place where I'm like, I just need some help. I just need some practical instruction on stuff that I can do immediately. In fact, a lot of times they were sharing philosophy that I already agreed with. I already knew, I saw the importance of engaging guests. I just needed some help on how to do it. I knew it was important. So I'm going to be very different. I'm going to be focusing a lot more on practicality than philosophy. So if you're looking for philosophy, kind of high, big picture thinking, this may not be the best training for you. I'm going to talk through practical things that you can do and implement immediately. And I think a lot of the guest services trainings neglect this major fact, that most churches don't have the budget to hire a guest services staff person. Because most conferences you go to where they're going to have a breakout on guest services, that breakout is led by the director of guest services at that church, because it's that big of a church, when has that type of budget where they can do that, which that's great. That's no knock on those churches. But most churches just don't have a guest services staff person. And so, you're talking through something, because as a guest services director at a big church, you have time to think about this all the time. Well, most churches don't. Most churches don't have the budget to hire a staff person, and if they did have the budget, there's other staff positions they need to fill first. So I just want to say to you, and this is hopefully what we'll talk through today, it doesn't require a lot of volunteers to create a great experience for guests. As long as those volunteers understand the vision and prepare well. If you have a few volunteers that get it, they're prepared when they show up, you can create a great guest experience. And you don't need a lot of people or any staff, budget position at all. Now you're saying, well, I do need volunteers, so how do I do that? Well, we have other trainings and other programs that focus on how to get more volunteers. We'll be doing more webinars that focus on that. That's not the focus of today. I realize that's another challenge in and of itself that we're all working through. But today we're going to talk about them understanding the vision and preparing well. And see, I used to think that creating a great guest experience was all about creating great processes. And the reason why is churches with great systems seem to be effective, right? You see something that works, and you learn to train other people, and it's a repeatable way of doing the same thing. Well, that's how you grow. That you're creating systems for things instead of everything being random. And everything was seemed so random at my first church. It was like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. There's no systems, nothing was written down. There were no procedures for anything. Like checking in at preschool was just every week it was different because different people were there. It didn't seem very safe at times. So I was like, well, we have to create great processes for first-time guests. And over time, here's what I discovered. There's a big difference between people and processes. That you can't create a process for people because everybody who walks through the doors of a church is different. They have different backgrounds. They have different stories. They have different worldviews. They have different needs and expectations. So you can't create a process and think, oh, this is repeatable like you can with accounting. It's not an Excel spreadsheet, it's a human being. It's not a check-in process, it's a human being. Now, you should create processes, and anything that you can systematize and get worked on, we need to grow up with our systems. We need to mature a little bit. We just don't have, we haven't done a good job of systematizing what we do. Those are great, but love should always have a bigger place. Systems should have a place, but love should have a bigger place. Here's what I've seen, okay? I've seen that planning makes up most of your success when it comes to guest services. Following up makes up the rest of it. Knowing that everyone is different doubles it. If you can just know that everyone who walks in here is different, they have different expectations, worldviews, all the stuff that we've talked about, you're already on your way. Acceptance, kindness, and empathy, that trumps it all. Okay, that overrides everything, but they're all important. Planning, following up, knowing everyone is different, that's important, but then love people. Acceptance, kindness, empathy, that's the best thing that you can do. So we're going to focus on 3 secrets to moving church guests from outsiders to insiders. Now, here's a hint. It has more to do with you than it does them. It has more to do with us as church leaders and church volunteers and staff members than it does the people who visit our church. So 2 quick notes before we jump in. 1, if you can, put your phones on silent. Not because it's not going to disrupt us. We can't hear it. It's totally fine. But if you can, put some of the distractions away, if that's possible, including your phone, and really try to kind of focus in and hone in on what we're talking about, that would be awesome. If you can't do that, no worries. Just thought I'd throw it out there. And also, want you to know, we have a chat box. So type in your questions, and we'll answer as many as we can. All right, so 2:11, here we go. We're going to talk about the 3 secrets are going to be around training and casting vision, looking at your lobby, and huddling after the service. Don't worry about writing these down yet because we're going to go into detail with all of these. But before we do that, I want you to see the guest services system. It's something that we offer as part of the Rocket Company. But really, when you look at the top of this triangle or the tip of the spear, it really begins with a guest team of volunteers. And then it comes to getting prepared before guests arrive. The time to think through guest services is not when guests are pulling in on a Sunday morning. It's to plan ahead of time. Then your parking lot, again, some of you, that may not be an issue because your church, there's one parking lot. We all park there. There's no real complication. There's only 20 cars, okay? But I mean, even at that church I worked at, the first church of 125 people, the parking lot was just kind of confusing because we had added on a building, starting with a very small chapel, moving into a little bit of a bigger building, and the parking lot kind of did a horseshoe around, and there was multiple levels, and it could be confusing. And then the lobby, we're going to talk about that. The worship service is part of engaging guests, and then follow-up. So number 1, train and cast vision to your volunteer guest services team. Really what we're talking about is building a guest services team. We're not going to focus on that as much because that's about a volunteer recruitment. Those are different trainings. We'll have more of those webinars coming up soon. It is about training them in the right way and casting proper vision to them, because if they get it and they understand what you're trying to do, you're already well on your way. So training the team is 4 parts. If I were to do a guest services training at your church right now, here's how I would train them. And again, we're not going to be able to get into all the content. We don't have time for that. So I'm gonna highlight it, and hopefully there'll be a replay. We'll send some notes, but then also we're going to talk about the guest services system later. Number one is mindset. If I was training a team, I would say here's the first place where we'd start is mindset, knowing how to walk in the shoes of guests. One of the best ways you can do that is think about what you're thinking about anytime you're a first-time guest anywhere. So if you're going to a restaurant for the first time, if you're going to school, your kid's school for the first time, because they're about to start kindergarten or first grade, or they're moving up to middle school, what's going through your mind? When you visit, you travel somewhere and you go to a hotel for the first time, what's going through your mind? And that's how you walk in the shoes of guests. We're going to talk about some ways at the end where you can literally get some feedback from guests and they can kind of tell you what's happening in their mind. But if you just begin the process of knowing this is different in the way I think when I pull into our church than what they're thinking when they pull into their church, our church. So getting out of your head and into their head, getting out of your shoes into their shoes, and thinking about things from their standpoint. Personalization, knowing how to embrace the uniqueness of each guest. And this is kind of what we talked about. A guest services team has to understand that everybody's different. They have to understand that different worldviews, people have different expectations. They have to know that there are people who come in and they have a religious expectation or they have no religious background, that there are people who are getting there and they're very hot-headed, easy to lose their temper people, some that are very quiet and aren't going to tell you much. It's the business of human beings. And so everyone is going to be different. So instead of letting people frustrate you and wishing people had your personality, as a member of the guest services team, you embrace it. Just embrace the uniqueness. Embrace that everyone is different. Uncertainty, knowing how to adapt in varying situations. Again, working on a guest services team is not like accounting. It's not like bookkeeping. You're going to get all kinds of curveballs thrown at you. There's people who are going to be frustrated at things that you would have thought, man, this is awesome. And people who are going to ask you questions that you're not ready for, and they're going to want certain things, and just knowing that you're going to have to be flexible and adapt, it's as different as every human being. That's what guest services is. Working with guest services is. You have to be ready for that. And then vision, talking about knowing how to serve with purpose. We want to demonstrate the love of Christ by how we love our guests. That's something like that could be a vision statement for your guest services team that said, hey, when we go out there, we're going to be clear and we're going to be flexible, but more than that, we're going to be loving. I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy, just establishing vision for a guest services team. And this is the overview of really the way we present it through the guest services system. Mindset is about feeling what they're feeling. Personalization is what I said. There's a difference between people and processes. There is no one size fits all. Uncertainty, just must be comfortable with varying degrees of uncertainty. And I learned that from a guest services director at Brownsbridge Community Church, a guy named Josh Harrison. That was just great the way he said that. Vision, not just what we do, but why we do it. Mission will inform our approach. And then what I would do is walk through the guest cycle. So think through a visit to your church from their perspective. So this is you and your guest services team. It's part of the training. It's part of the creation of your guest services team, thinking through these things. The guest cycle is what I call it. Someone pulling in. What's it like for them pulling in the parking lot? Is it clear? Do they know where they're going? Is it a frustrating process? You don't think a parking lot team is important? Think about Christmas time at the mall. Where do people get most frustrated? In the parking lot. People are more frustrated behind the wheel of their vehicle than they are almost anywhere else in life. So is it important for them, and this being their first impression with your church? You better believe it. It's a very big deal. Walking in. This is walking in, the front door, walking in to your lobby, dropping off. Do they know where to drop off their kids? Sitting down. This is your worship service. Picking up their kids, walking out. What's the experience like for them as they leave? Driving off. Pulling in, walking in, dropping off, sitting down, picking up, walking out, driving off. That's the guest cycle. And if you can think through each place on this cycle, is there clear signage? Do people understand, where they're going, what to do? Is it clear for them? Is it inviting? Is it warm for them? That's a great way to train a team. And then I think you should have a weekly team meeting with the people who are volunteering that week. You pick a start time, stick to it. If you start late, it'll keep stretching to a later and later start time. Pick a place. Meet in the same place every week. So this is just a quick huddle. If you can provide coffee and pastries, do it. If you don't have the budget to do that, then no worries. Pick an end time to the meeting. Nobody wants a meeting that drags on. And besides, this is the team that needs to be out with the people. They need to be setting stuff up in the parking lot, in the lobby. I think 12 minutes should be the absolute max length of this weekly meeting. Do not go any longer than that. I would try to keep mine at about 6 or 7 minutes, but I gave a little grace period there to move it to 12. Just a quick team meeting, and then stick with it. And here's what I would do. Encouragement and appreciation is where I would start. Because you're probably going to have to meet early in the morning because you got to get there before everybody else gets there so you can get ready for guests to show up. And you want to kind of pep talk everybody so you can recognize an individual on your team for something great they did, either at church or in his and her personal life. Hey, Jim, I know you coach your daughter's softball team, and I see you guys won a tournament this weekend. I saw that on Facebook. That's awesome. Congratulations. Hey, I know, so-and-so, your son just graduated from high school. That's awesome. You made it through, stuff like that. Thank the group. You can mix these up. Just spend some time where you genuinely thank them. Share a story of a win. Hey, there was a family. They were here for the first time, and here 2 months later, they're plugged into our church, and you guys were a big part of that. Thank you so much. Or do something special for someone's birthday, or someone's going through a hard time, or something like that. Somebody who's, they've been sick, you get them a card, or, something that just lets people know that you care about what's going on in their life. Then you want to move to vision. This is why we do what we do. If all that is you have a vision statement, and this is just the time where you reinforce it. Hey, we're about to go out there and do a bunch of random stuff, getting ready for guests. I just want to remind you, this is why we do what we do. Then information, stuff you need to know to do your job. Hey, parking lot team, it's raining today, so I want to make sure you get your, raincoats, or you have umbrellas so you can help people walk in. Just any kind of information. Hey, just so you know, our pastor is announcing something, and there's probably going to be a lot of questions about it at the information table. Just stuff like that. Ask them if they have any questions, and then close in prayer. All right? That's a lot of information. So, Haley, let's jump into Q&A for a minute before we go to point number 2 and talk through any questions people have.
Yeah, Ben, we've gotten several great questions, so you guys keep them coming. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But we had one question about, what would you say is an average guest retention rate? So if a church is able to retain, say, 25% of their visitors to come back, would you say that's a good percentage? What should we aim for?
Yeah, I think it depends on where your church is located geographically. If you're in a college town, the retention is probably going to be lower, or if like you're in a tourist town where it's people are in and out of town. If you're in a growing community, the retention is also going to be lower. But if you are in a smaller town, or a more kind of established community, in the sense that it's really not growing a lot, even if it's bigger, where it's like 3 or 4 high schools in the town, but there's not just a ton of new people moving in from all over the place, then my goal with retention would be 50%. And I would say if on a Sunday, if we have 6 people who show up, 6 first-timers, I'm going to congratulate the guest services team if 3 of them return. I would just pick that as a goal. But anytime you have undefined things like that, I would just try to start with a certain percentage and then grow from there. So month 1, if we have 10% retention, then our goal month 2 is to have 20%. So we start measuring how many of them come back. For me, in an established community, my goal would be 50%. That's a great question, though. What else?
Yeah, Sandy asked, is there a certain personality type that you think works best for a guest services volunteer?
Well, I think that depends on the role. And part of the guest services system, we have a list of roles and responsibilities. I think the most vital position is the person who works at the information table. And we're going to talk all about that in a minute, or the people who work there. I think, probably the parking lot team is going to be people who are interested in working on a parking lot team. They like being outside. They like thinking through, traffic patterns and, driving around in the golf cart or walking out and setting everything up. I would say there's been a wide range of personalities at my church that work on the parking team. The key with all of them is that they've been friendly. And, people can get mad at people on a parking team, and so they have to be able to handle people's frustrations and keep a calm temper. Overall, though, just to summarize, the key person who can work on a guest services team is people who understand that everyone is different, and they understand that everybody has a different background, and they don't expect everybody to be the same way. So people who have a lot of grace, more than they would be, rigid, kind of truth-centered people, I think that those are great people to have on that team.
Great. What would you recommend is a good way to measure and track how many of your guests are returning?
That is a great question, and I don't know. I haven't seen a great system for that. I think one of the things that I would push for would be if you could have a new visitor card, where very simple, they could just write down like a name and an email address, and then a phone number could be optional. Or do they have any questions, that could be optional, and they could either drop that in the offering bucket or they could give it to the person who works at the information table. And I think if you could see an increasing number of cards, that would be a good way to track. If you're like, hey, in December, 10 people filled out those cards, but in January we had 5. So something's happening. They're not filling that out as much. At North Point, there was a clicker. As people walk through, I was just never sure how effective that was. At my first church, I just went up in the balcony and counted heads, and then tried to figure out how many we had in our children's ministry that day. So there's no great system for it. You got to think through the way your church is laid out and what would be the easiest way to grab numbers, but I'm sorry I don't have a better system for you than that. Haley, let's go one more question, then we'll keep moving.
Yeah, last one for now. Larry asked, do you think that the guest services team should dress all the same? Should they wear something that stands out so the guests can easily find them?
Well, I know for a lot of our churches, and church leaders listening, they don't have budgets for everybody to have, to get, this swag or something like that. I do think the more you can let people know, hey, I'm here to help you, the better. So if you can do where they're all wearing, the same shirt and they, name tags, if you can do that stuff, I say yes, do that. If you don't have the budget for that and it's just, it's lanyards, or maybe, hey, let's all wear the same colored shirt, and then we'll have these, name tags that we put on. I think it is important because it's what I do. When I walk into, the airport and I'm looking for somebody who works for the airline company that will help, direct me, or somebody who works at the airport that'll show me which way to go. I'm looking for somebody who has something on that tells me, okay, they can direct me. So, yes, I think it's important. All right, Haley, I'm going to keep moving. Those are great questions. Y'all keep them coming. We're going to go to number 2. Secret number 2, we're going to talk about taking the lobby seriously. Now, in my opinion, the lobby is the most underutilized, overlooked part of the guest services experience. I think there's so much opportunity here, so much happens here that I think this is when people start dropping the ball a little bit as far as guest services go. There's churches, they do a great job from stage. They make guests feel welcome without making them feel uncomfortable. But the lobby is just where there's opportunity to really engage people, and it needs to be, I think all church lobbies need to be thought through from the perspective of a first-time guest. What is this like for them? And I realize for some of you, you don't have a lobby, or you're tear down every week. I'm talking about if I'm there for the first time and I walk into the place where an information table would be, that area, you need to take that very seriously. Or I'm walking into the church. The first time I open the door and I'm stepping in, what am I seeing? That's a really, really big deal. So we're going to talk through an information table guide. This is part of the guest services system. I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. First, put the information table in a highly visible area. When I am at a church, and I was at a church I had never been to this past Sunday, and I was a guest speaker there, and then a student came up to me and asked when the student ministry met. And I said, I don't know. This is my first time here, but come with me and let's go find out together. And there was just a clear, visible area where the information table was. I knew exactly where to walk with this guy. If that would be a confusing thing for me to find in the situation, then the information table is not in a great area. Again, my first church, the information table was at the corner of our main sanctuary. It was a terrible place for an information table to be because at that point, people didn't necessarily have questions. A lot of times there wasn't even someone standing behind it. So you want it to be in a highly visible area. Give it clear, visible signage. So make the signage say information, okay? Have it say have questions, question mark, but make that sign very, very big. I mean, you have to think, if I'm at your church, first time, I'm a sinner, I feel guilty, God's going to strike me from lightning, I just have a question for you. Where do I ask questions? And that needs to be very obvious. It's obvious to us who've been in church for a while. We know these are called information tables, or it's not obvious to everybody else. You're going to, the information table in a visible area, clear visible signage. Get help on its design, its look and feel. You probably have people in your church who are great with look and feel, or there may be some people who have been responsible for creating kind of cool areas or inviting kind of areas at other parts of your church. Get them to help with the information table, because anytime you want to engage people, you want to create something that's inviting. And even if you don't have a lot of budget, I mean, my wife and I, when we first got married, we lived in my sister's basement, but we still wanted it to be an inviting place for people to come to. And of course, I have Bible study. I'm doing Bible studies there, and we have stuff that's happening there. We had no money, but we still wanted to make it an inviting place. We wanted it to be an inviting place for people who had never been there before. So work on that with your information table. I would call the information table volunteers, I would call them help specialists. If you don't like the name help specialist, then director of information. Think of a name that is different than just volunteer or person who stands behind this table. And the reason why is because you want to give them a sense of vision that this is a big deal. Give them a sense of ownership. The help specialists who stand behind this desk are some of the most important people every week at this church. And so we do not take that role lightly, and we don't just call them random volunteers. We created this name, this special name, just for this group of people because it's such a big deal. Make sure they know what's going on around the church. So I'll come back to my example from this past week. So I went with this teenager to the information table. I asked her, hey, when does high school, middle school ministry meet? And she didn't know. She ended up looking it up, and she told me the correct time. She said, yeah, it meets in the main sanctuary right behind me, which was not true. So that's okay. I mean, there's a lot going on. It was a pretty big church, but you want to make sure they know what's going on around the church. Here's some examples, like upcoming events, as much detail as they can know, or you can at least put in their hand. Nursery or preschool protocol. People will come to the information table and say, hey, my daughter has an allergy, what's your policy on this? Or what do you guys do if someone else tries to pick up my kid? Now, they should know that obviously in the nursery preschool area, but they're going to also ask your information table guide about that. Hey, is there a way where we can tithe online? Or where can I give to whatever? When does high school ministry meet? These are all just examples. How do I sign up for a small group? How do I become a volunteer? How do I get a copy of last week's sermon? They can't know everything, but in a volunteer position, as much information as you can tell them so that they're prepared, that would be awesome. All right, look at the bottom bullet point here. Make sure the table is stocked with proper forms, brochures, cards, etc. So if the pastor just did a sermon on small groups, inviting people to sign up for small groups, and now I'm at the information table and saying, oh, I wasn't paying attention. How do I sign up for small groups? Oh, you fill out this form. Make sure that they have that form. Oh, give me your email address here, and I'll follow up with the right information. Just make sure that stuff is there. Hey, I want to find out about summer camp. Do you guys have like a flyer for summer camp? If you have that, if that's something you have in your student ministry area, it would be great to have that on your information table desk. This is just an example. It's kind of pixelated here because we had to blow it up, of these the design for some cards that we provided for you in the guest services system. It's just they can put their name, email, and if they have any questions or questions that they have, and then people can follow up with them. So make relationship building the key. I say this: the people in your church who are relational wizards, like relational magicians, I do not understand how they are so gifted. God has blessed them at their ability to relate to people, to connect with people that they've never met before. Those are the people that I'm specifically going to and saying, hey, I need to talk with you. I have a role that I would love for you to take, and I want you to know that I'm going to be very persistent, even if you say no. I would love for you to consider helping us when it comes to our information table. Here's why. And I'll take as many Sundays a month as you could give me. But if you feel like you can only do one, I'll take it. I'll take as many as you can give me. The people who are naturally just skilled and gifted at that, these are great people to have at info tables. And then training. And this is what I was going to show you as far as helping them think through the way to talk to people who are asking questions. Guests who are asking questions, visitors who are asking questions. I would give this to them. I would train them in this way: inspiration, information, invitation. All right. Now I'm gonna show you a practical example of this. But that you start. Someone ask a question. You start by inspiring. Then you move to the information that they're actually asking for, and then you try to get them to take some type of step. So a guest asks, hey, do you have programs for teenagers here or anything like that? My son is 14, and I was just wondering. Let's say this is a mom. Hey, you guys do anything with the teenagers? So the help specialist answers this: yes, we love teenagers at this church. What a fun group of people to hang out with. That's inspiration. You know why that's inspiration? Because who cares more about that teenage son, that 14-year-old boy, than anybody else? His mom does. So when she says, we love teenagers here, what a fun group of people to hang out with, you're inspiring. They meet on Sunday nights at 6 o'clock. That's information. That's the information that she's looking for. If you have time, I'd love for someone to walk you down to our student room so you know where it is. That's an invitation. So you could do this. This is just something you think through. All kinds of examples. Someone says, hey, do you have small groups? Yeah, we love, at this church, we love the idea of people developing relationships. Because it's hard out there in the real world, just feeling like you're truly connected to people. And then you go to information. In a couple of weeks, we're going to launch our small groups. They're all going to happen on Sunday afternoon here at the church. I would love to get your email address and connect you with Jim. He's the director of discipleship or our small groups or Sunday school or whatever. That's the invitation. So that's a system you can teach someone at the information table to walk through with people. So, Haley, before we go to number 3, I'll back up so some of you can see this right here. Do we have any questions? Let's take 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll keep moving.
Sure. One person asked, how much do you think that the senior pastor should be involved in the guest services stuff, or should that be mostly volunteers?
I think as much as he wants to be. I think what we're about to talk about, I think, would be something good that he could do. We're going to talk about huddling up after the worship service. I don't think he necessarily needs to be out in the lobby when church starts. Although I think that's great if he can be meeting people. Again, some pastors are very extroverted and some are very, very introverted. So you really have to, the introverted ones are the ones who are going to have to push themselves a little bit to get out there and meet people, be in the lobby, be standing at the front afterwards. The hard part for a pastor, especially senior pastors who communicate, is after sermons, a lot of times, conversation is going to get dominated by someone who has an issue that relates to what you're talking about. There are people in churches who are, high need. They take up a lot of time, draining people who, are always coming up week after week to talk. It's going to be difficult for a senior pastor, especially a communicator, to be able to think in guest services terms while also, being a communicator and while also being a pastoral counselor. So I would say, trying to find a balance, trying to get out there as much as they can, but not to think about it as their primary role on a Sunday.
Okay, great. Well, Wendy asked, do you think that the information table should be more visible as the guest walks into the sanctuary or when they're actually leaving?
I think you just think about where a guest is going to be looking. I think if they walk in and think, I have a question, they can see someplace where they can get an answer. So I would say as they walk in.
Okay.
Great question, though. All right, let's go one more, Haley.
One more for now. Tanya said that they've done training to cast vision for their teams on several occasions, but still can't get them to actually get there on time for their weekly meetings before the service. Do you have any suggestions for what to do about that?
Yeah, I would say welcome to every ministry that every church leader in the entire world runs. That's a challenge that I have never seen anyone be able to fix in any situation. I don't want to, make things hopeless for you there. I think what you could do if you had to is have a conversation with these people and say, what time, what location, what frequency are you going to be most likely to attend? If it's just that they're 5, 10, 15 minutes late, they're just the kind of people who are always going to be 5, 10, 15 minutes late. My middle sister, Julia, so great relationally, great connecting with people, has never been on time anywhere in her entire life. So she would still be a valuable member of the guest services team, but she would absolutely not ever be on time. So they may just be people who are a little bit late, and that's just kind of what happens. Or it may be that because you need to move the meetings to a bi-weekly thing, or you need to change the location or the time. Maybe it needs to be after the service, and you kind of huddle up and plan for next week. You just got to talk with them. That's the best I can give you. That's a challenge we all feel. Okay, we're going to keep moving. Number 3, offer guests a place to connect after the service. All right, and again, like I told you, you hang on to the end. I'm going to talk about 6 questions that you can ask with your team or ask yourself at the very end to get prepared for guests even this Sunday, this upcoming week. I call it a new visitor huddle. So this allows you to make a relational connection with people who visited your church. And so it's just something that you offer during the announcement time, or maybe the pastor, can pray and then say this at the end before he or she dismisses them. Say, hey, just so you know, if you're here for the first time, we have something that's called the new visitor huddle, or it's the first timer gathering, or you have, some cool name for it. We have something called Connect, and it's for people who are here for the first time, or maybe you've been here for, 1 or 2 times or 3 times, and you have some questions you'd love to ask, or you haven't, met anybody. We're going to have a huddle, and it's going to happen at, let's say your church service ends at 12. It's going to happen at 12:30, and it's going to be 10 minutes long. Or it's going to happen in 5 minutes, and it's going to be 10 minutes long. No longer than that. You just let people know that you're going to huddle up with them after the service. And this allows you to make a relational connection with people who visited your church. If you have the budget to give them a gift, even if you don't have a budget for gifts, consider writing them a personal note. I know you're not going to be able to pre-plan for that because you're not going to know them until they're there. So the note it obviously won't have their name, but it could just say, hey, I'm so grateful you visited our church and appreciate you, thanks. It could be really simple. If you do have the budget to give them, a Starbucks gift card, it could be a coffee mug with your church logo on it. It could be a little bag of candy, like whatever it is. It's just our way of saying we appreciate that you're here. look for something. Then you answer. It allows you to answer any questions that they have. So this is like another way of connecting with them, answering questions for people who may not go to the information table or they may not read through the bulletin. Again, this past Sunday, the bulletin had so much information in it, it was overwhelming. It was kind of hard to digest and figure out specifically what I needed. It helps people take a next step and get connected and involved in your church. So I think what you want to do, again, is let there be some type of invitation. In fact, this allows you to learn what you're doing right and wrong as a church when it comes to creating a great guest experience. So there are going to be people who are just in this huddle, and as soon as it's over, they leave. And then there are going to be some people who they linger around. How do you get here? But the relational connection at the top, people feel lonely. People want to go to a place where they belong. People want to, get to know people. Even people who are introverted, they want, this sense of community, and they're not going to be able to walk up and talk to total strangers, but they will if it's set up and you've kind of communicated and introduced yourself, or if the pastor does this and they already feel like they know you a little bit because you've communicated. Some of these people are just going to stay around, and then they're going to meet you, and you're going to get to ask questions. You're just going to get to know each other. Well, that's a relational connection, and anytime you can make a relational connection, people are more prone to come back because people go to places where they're connected. That's where they show up, but places where they know people and people know them. So this is just a sample script, okay? And you're not going to be able to have time to write all this down. But this is part of what we offer, and this is not what you have to say. If you're just wondering how can I navigate this huddle, or how can I have another staff member, what do I tell them to say, or how do I teach them to kind of lead this huddle? You should have a group of people and just say, hey everyone, let's kind of gather around here for just a minute. If you have a spot for everyone to sit down, great. If not, just stay standing. My name's Steve. I've been a part of this church family for 5 years, and thank you so much for coming here today. I recognize that you take a chance anytime you try out a new church, anytime you try out any new place. However you got here, I'm glad you made it. I hope it was a great experience for you and your family. And hey, if not, we'd love to know what we can do to make it better for first-time guests like you. Also, hey, thank you for taking time to come to this quick little gathering. I want to be respectful of your time, so I won't keep you here long at all. The main point of this is just to connect with you and see if you have any questions. And just so you know, we don't put people on the spot or pressure them. We just simply want to know you to the extent that you want to be known. So if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And after that, I'd love to meet you. I'd love to just hang around and get to know you. But again, no pressure. Does anybody have any questions or comments? And at that point, you allow a little time to see if somebody will ask something. Rarely they will, or you may have one person who has 4 questions, nobody else says anything. The main point is just to get yourself in a place where you can meet them. Okay, well, cool. Again, thanks for showing up today. I know you're all busy. I appreciate you doing the hard work of getting your family to church. And if there's anything at all we can do for you, please let us know. And hopefully we'll see all of you next week. And that's it. It's just a way to let them know that you're glad they're there, that you know that you're not perfect, that you want to answer any questions, that you want them to come back, that you want them to know that you will do anything you can for this to be a great experience for them. You're wanting them to let them know all of those things, because your music may not have been what they preferred, or your preaching may not have been like the preaching that they grew up and they're used to, but if they know that this is a church that is about them, loving them, showing the love of Christ to them, that's a big deal. All right, Haley, let's go one question.
One question. Ron, how do you suggest getting to stay for the huddle?
Read that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sorry. How do you suggest to get them to actually stay for the huddle?
How do you get them to stay for the huddle? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that there is a way to get them to stay necessarily outside of just if you have the budget to buy things to bribe them with. That's the best thing. Hey, we have a gift for you. If you're like, well, is this gift compelling enough for people to stay? That you just have to ask people in your church. You can ask regular attenders, hey, if you had been here for the first time and I said I was going to give you like this CD, would you have stayed? Or if I would have said I was going to give you this gift card or this coffee mug or this pencil or this whatever, would that have compelled you to stay? You may have to do a little research. You can do it with your staff if you have a staff, or what I would do in this situation is ask my wife. I would just say, ask, because she just has great insight into stuff like this. Holly, what would make you stay? What should we offer as a gift? She's great with stuff like that. Haley, we're going to come back to Q&A for just a minute, but you guys have had great questions. I'm going to ask you a question. Would you like to improve the experience for guests at your church? Of course you would. That's you wouldn't have shown up at this seminar without that. So we've covered a lot. There's a whole lot more we can talk about. I deleted somewhere around 20 to 30 slides last night because I knew we were going to run out of time. There's a lot more that we can talk about. Even if we had all day, we couldn't cover everything. You know why? Because we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are different, and we're all going to have unique challenges that we face. I think that you need more than just training. I think you need resources. I think you need resources for you. I think you need resources for your volunteer guest services team. That's what I would be looking for if I was in your situation, and that's why we created the guest services system. So the guest services system, it's a resource guide that gives you what you need to train a team, prepare for guests, and connect with visitors when they show up. A lot of the stuff that we've just talked about is included and more, and that's what the guest services system does for you. And I think if you jump, you're going to be encouraged. I think you'll be thrilled by how quickly the guest services system can improve the visitor experience at your church. Number one, it's just going to improve the awareness. It's going to improve the visibility. You're going to be thinking more about guests as you go through this guest services system and the resources that it offers, and that alone is going to quickly improve the experience for guests. This has worked for all types of church leaders. It's worked for churches of all sizes, churches that had an overflow of guests, and churches that hadn't had any visitors in a while. It's worked for all of them. So what this includes, this guest services system, it has an overview, just an overview, kind of a big picture of where we're going, a team training, we talked about that earlier in this webinar, team roles and responsibilities, parking lot team roles, parking lot responsibilities, lobby team roles, lobby responsibilities, worship service, and then follow-up team and responsibilities, a team meeting schedule, an agenda, a new visitor prep guide. So just a process of getting prepared. It's a exercise you work through with your team. Prep questions that you can ask in addition to that. Information table guide. We covered a lot of that today. A design for info table sign-up cards. There's 2 colors. We have brown and teal that are included. A visitor response email. So someone fills out the card. What do I say to them in response? We've written that email for you. A connection huddle guide, $139. But today what we're going to do with Fast Action Bonus, we want to reward people who act fast, is Service Craft. If you sign up by the end of this webinar, now let me tell you what that is. It's a workbook that gives you simple steps to planning your weekly worship service. It helps you think strategically. It helps you plan your services with creativity. It helps you craft several different types of services. It helps you engage more people, helps you get ahead. It's a new approach to your typical Sunday routine. Now, you may say, hey, that's part of what we do. The routine is what we celebrate. That's totally great. There may just be 1 or 2 small changes you can make that really will breathe some fresh life and creative energy into your worship service. And we retail that at $29, but that's free when you sign up by the end of our webinar. So when you jump in, what you're going to get is all the stuff that we've talked about in the guest services system, and then Service Craft. We're going to add that in as a bonus. Now, if all these things did, when you're thinking through the guest experience and you're thinking through the kind of service experience that they're going to have guests walk away and say, I feel like I belong here, instead of I felt like an outsider, would it be worth it? I mean, if this helped you build a motivated volunteer guest services team, would it be worth it? If this helped you, enabled you to prepare for guests before they arrive, would it be worth it? Help you to engage guests at every step of their visit to your church, would it be worth it? Last thing, if it allowed you to follow up with guests after the worship service was over, would it be worth it? Yes. Churches that treat guests well grow and develop a good reputation faster. So you treat guests well, they're going to be more likely to come back, right? And that's going to help you grow. And when I say develop a good reputation, I'm not saying that you have a bad reputation or that church has a bad reputation. I'm saying that even guests who never come back to your church are going to speak well of your church when they're talking to their neighbors. They're going to say, I went to that church, it's not my style, or it's too far away for me, but that would be a great church for you to go to. Or I just being there, I think that you would love that church. I'm not really going back to church. I'm kind of I've kind of fizzled, but I know you go to church and you're looking for one. That's a great place to go. It's just going to help your reputation. And you can see why it's an incredible deal at $158. Just one-time payment of $158. But today, $79. We're going to go 50% off today. You can get all of the guest services system and also ServiceCraft totally for free today at guestservicessystem.com. And there should be a link in the chat stream, or we're going to put the link up in the chat stream where you can see it, or you can just open up a separate tab and type in guestservicessystem.com. It's a one-time $79 payment, and you get all of that. But you got to move pretty quickly. You got to jump in before we jump out of here. So you jump in. Will, if you're listening, maybe we can expand the time like for 15 minutes because I've ran a little long or something like that. That may not be possible, so you got to move fast. guestservicessystem.com. You jump in, 50% off of all the resources that I just listed. We're also we have something incredible called the Sunday morning system that walks through, every piece and facet of the Sunday morning experience. You're going to see that when you check out. You want to see that. That's an incredible, much bigger resource that we're offering as well. But the guest services system, there's practical stuff to help now, and also ServiceCraft. We're putting that in here. It's really a guest services staff position for $79. You get an entire staff position for $79. guestservicessystem.com. Now, I told you if you stay to the end, and we're going to have some time for you guys to ask some more questions here in a minute, but I was going to give you 6 questions to ask yourself and your team to get ready for first-time guests. So again, hang tight if you've asked some questions, because we're going to try to jump in and answer some of those in just a minute. But I told those of you, if you stayed to the end, and right under an hour, so I want to stay committed to what I promised, that I would give you these 6 questions. Number 1, what is some potential pain or discomfort our guests might feel? So have you pulled up to your church, walked in the front door, dropped off a kid, even if you don't have a kid? I'm saying, have you just gone through that exercise in your mind and thought through what is some pain or discomfort our guests might feel? A lot of them feel guilty because they haven't been to church in a while. They feel tired because your church meets in the morning. So what's one way we can alleviate that pain? You know what? Guests who show up, they may feel tired. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have coffee. And I'm going to make sure guests know that we have coffee and they can drink as much of it as they want. That's just an example. What do we want our guests to feel as they visit our church? Do you want them to feel welcome? Well, we have to get clear around what does that mean? What does it mean to feel welcome? When you go into a place and you feel welcomed, what does that mean? I think for my wife would want clarity. She would want to feel like I know where I'm supposed to go drop off our kids. I know where the nursery preschool area is, the elementary age area is. I know where I'm supposed to walk in. Clarity. So it might be a great exercise to walk through different places of your church and make sure that you have clear signage, that there's clear signs pointing people where they need to go. What's one step we can take towards helping them feel that? We're going to train our parking lot team to smile and wave at people as they pull in, because we want people to feel welcome. Some of these things are very simple things to think through. What are some things that could be confusing to our guests if they're not clearly explained? So let's say you have signage for everything, but what they may not know is that the 2-year-old and 3-year-old class is combined, or 2 through 4 is combined. So we need to make sure that we have signage that says that, or what's one step we can take to explain these things that could be confusing. Guests, need to know that if they come to the second service, that when they come in that parking lot, there's going to be still people leaving from the first service. Can we put a sign that lets people know? I don't know. Some of these things are just so specific to your church, and there may be some things that you say there is not a step that we can take to explain that. But you want to find steps to explain as many things as you can that could be confusing for people. So again, let me review what you're going to get. You're going to get all of this as part of the guest services system. Then the fast action bonus is ServiceCraft, $158 for a staff position for the worship team and guest services. It's $79 today. There's the information for you. You can also get in the chat stream if you're having any questions or confusion. So, Haley, questions, fire them at me.
Yeah, we've got a few left here, Ben. Meredith wants to know what draws the line between making a new guest feel welcome compared to just being embarrassed.
Yeah, I would avoid personally the whole if you're a guest here, stand up. There's churches that say, there's churches that have people introduce themselves. You have to introduce yourself to the church. Or they'll say, hey, Jim, tell everybody who you brought with you today. Well, this is my cousin. He's in from out of town. He's never been to this church before. You guys help him feel welcome. I think any time that you put somebody on the spot, then that can make people feel very, very uncomfortable. There are people who, if they had to stand up, there are people who they don't want everybody looking at them. So I think that everybody looking at me or listening to me is too much. I think when it comes to the way I always try to do it in the worship service auditorium, whatever you call it, sanctuary, 20 minutes or so before church starts, usually the guests are in there and they're sitting down and they're reading the bulletin, because the people who are regulars are in the lobby talking to each other. And then there are people who are regulars that you see them because they're always in there sitting down, so you know them. Other people are guests. So I always used to just try to, kind of feel it out. As I talked to them and I got the feeling they loved the idea that I was striking up a conversation with them, then I would engage in it more. If I got the feeling that people didn't necessarily want to, I would just introduce myself and I would just say, hey, I'm glad you're here. It was great to meet you. Grateful that you've shown up today, and then walked off because they just kind of wanted to be left alone. Again, you just want to be kind of aware of what people are looking for, but I wouldn't put people on the spot. It's a great question, though. Haley, what else?
Cameron wants to know, do you recommend giving out welcome packets to guests, and if so, what would you put in it?
That is a great question, and I do like that idea. I just think, again, whatever gift that you would give them at your connection huddle, that's a great thing to give them in a welcome packet. I guess you have to think in terms of when you would give that to them. If if it was something that was just offered at the information table, absolutely. If it was something that you could also give away at the connection huddle, absolutely. But again, I wouldn't have them like all stand and give them this welcome packet. I would say something that says, so glad you came here today, like a note that was handwritten. Some type of gift if you had the budget to give them some type of gift, and some type of resource that lets you know. We have these resources at the Rock Company, what happens when you give, although they haven't given, or what happens when you serve, and we're coming out with one called What Happens When You Attend. And that would be a great thing to include in this welcome packet because it is visionary, it is spiritual, it is kind of about the church at large, but it's not like real invasive when it's like, oh, this is all of our theological beliefs and you have to line up with all of them. You just want people to feel appreciated and welcome, not overwhelmed by the information or by the opinions of things. So I know I'm talking through this a lot. I'm kind of thinking through it as I talk about it. I think right now, if I had to decide, I would say give them a gift card and a handwritten note. And the handwritten note also includes some type of piece of information that talks about your church, the thing you would love for them to get involved with, small groups, or did you know that we have multiple services, something that could kind of connect them. That's it. All right, keep going, Haley.
Awesome. We've got one more here, Ben, from Kim. She asked, would you have greeters be available before all of the services, even before things like Sunday school, or just focus on them being there before a big worship service?
Well, I would have at least one greeter there before Sunday school. I would have to kind of find out from you how many how many first-time guests come to Sunday school, which from what I'm hear you saying, Sunday school happens before the main service. If there is a regular influx of guests who show up at Sunday school, then yeah, you may not need the same number of people, but you certainly need someone out there asking questions. If I came to your church for the first time and went to Sunday school, it would be even more confusing than coming to your worship service because now I assume people are scattered in different places of your church. In a worship service, I would understand. The sign says it starts at 10 o'clock, so everybody's probably walking into some type of big room at 10 o'clock. Sunday school could look different church by church, the way you have them. I don't know how your church is laid out. I'm definitely going to need to ask somebody, hey, I'm married with 2 young kids, so do my wife and I go to the same Sunday school class? Where do we go, and what do we do with our kids during Sunday school? So you need to have people out who can answer questions if people have never been or coming to your church for the first time. If first-timers never come to Sunday school, you're fine, but I would certainly at least have one person out there ready to answer questions. All right, Haley, is that it?
That's it. Thanks so much, Ben.
Yeah, so guys, I just want to tell you again, I appreciate this. I appreciate you jumping in, tracking with us the whole time. You ask great questions, and we are upping the frequency of our webinars as of recent, if you haven't noticed. So it's free content, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of things. All kinds of different people are going to be doing some practical training, so we would love for you to just join us for any of these webinars that you can make, because we love the interaction and the discussion, and we love getting to talk about stuff that happens in churches, especially small churches. So I appreciate it, and we'll see you guys at our next webinar.